This is Keys to the Shop, episode 250, Planning Better Events with Stephen Moloney of the Barista League. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFiorio. I'm your host for the show, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. Appreciate you joining us. Those of you who are just joining us on the show, super glad to have you. Those of you who've been here for years, you are amazing, and you're all amazing, really. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the show, I would encourage you to do that. Just hit the subscribe button wherever you'd like to listen to podcasts, whether that's on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, CastBox, or Overcast. I love Overcast myself, but subscribe to the show and you'll always be updated with new content, and also share these shows with a friend. We're also trying to get up to 200 reviews on iTunes, so if you love what we do and you have been positively impacted by Keys to the Shop, would you give us a 5-star rating or review on the show over at iTunes? That would really be awesome. Thank you so much to everybody who's rated or reviewed the show. It's so helpful. And I also wanted to tell you all that Keys to the Shop offers consulting and coaching for you and your business. So if you're just starting out, wanting to open a coffee shop or getting ready to launch your first store, and you want to have a guide or someone to help you get started on the right foot, or you're looking to level up your existing operations into a couple of different locations, or you just want to improve operations, there's a lot of ways that Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you, either in person or remotely. I would encourage you to just email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. We can schedule a call where we can talk about the details of what it might look like to work with Keys to the Shop Consulting. Again, the email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the always amazing Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers. And what I love about them is not just the fact that they have the best equipment out there, just always looking for and curating a selection of the best stuff that you can stock your home or your business with, but they're also dedicated to helping you select the right equipment for your situation. So whether that's espresso machines, brewers, grinders, or even restaurant equipment like under-counter refrigeration, they're dedicated to outfitting you with what you need to be successful in coffee. If you go to the website, prima-coffee.com, you'll see the great equipment, but also a lot of resources as well to help you learn about coffee, learn about the equipment. Again, they do this because they want to see you succeed in specialty coffee. So I really would recommend, if you're in the market for commercial coffee equipment, look no further than prima-coffee.com. Reach out to them, let them know you heard about them on Keys to the Shop. Again, that website, prima-coffee.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by the world's leader in plant-based performance beverages. This, of course, is the Pacific Barista Series. The Barista Series is like a plant-based juggernaut. I mean, what they produce is just amazing. Between all of their beverages in the Barista Series line, the coconut, rice, oat, hemp, almond, they all perform so well on bar because they're designed for baristas and with a ton of feedback from the world's best baristas. So when you get these products in your fridge and you make a cappuccino or latte with them, you'll know that it's going to stand up to the heat from steaming. It's going to produce an amazing, silky texture, great for latte art, and the balance of the beverage is going to be perfect. It's going to focus on the coffee, and plant-based customers everywhere love the Barista Series, and I would really encourage you to try it out for yourself. You can find out more information over at their website, pacificfoodservice.com. If you're looking for the best in plant-based beverages to offer your customers, then for me, the choice is clearly the Pacific Barista Series. All right, everybody. Well, today we are welcoming back to the show a guest back from 2018. Stephen Moloney is the founder of the Barista League. He is a 2-time Swedish Barista Champion. He founded the Barista League in 2015. And since then, in 2015, and especially since 2018, when we had him last on the show, the team has really grown. And the Barista League's original coffee competition concept is now a global brand that's recognized across 3 continents. So it's really doing well and resonating with people. And what the Barista League is all about, whether they find themselves throwing wild coffee parties, producing reality competition shows, or running barista competitions, is accessibility, sustainability, and community. That's at the core of what they seek to do with each event that they put on. And of course, they've learned so much over the course of now almost 6 years of the Barista League. And now you can benefit from that information because they've produced a book, The Barista League's Guide to Planning Better Events, which is a practical guide of how to run coffee events for your community. And in this conversation with Stephen, we are going to be diving into this book a little bit to help you produce great events in your community. We're also going to be talking about how the Barista League has grown over the years and what they did to pivot amidst COVID and really continue to create these events and drive the values of accessibility, sustainability, and community over a digital platform. So there's a ton of practical advice that Stephen has to offer in this interview. I'm really glad to get him back on the show, especially since they're going to be launching the second season of the Barista League on the 25th of November, which is obviously coming up soon. So I think that this conversation is really going to help you, not just with events, but how you think about your community and how you approach the community's needs. They've done such a fantastic job at the Barista League, connecting baristas, fostering community, and I'm excited to share this conversation with you. So let's get right to it. Here now is my interview with the founder of the Barista League, Stephen Moloney. Stephen, welcome back to Keys to the Shop. So good to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, a pleasure. And you've been extremely busy even in the midst of a pandemic where we can't gather. You're producing these online events and things have just not slowed down for you at all, it seems. Plus, you've produced a book. I'm kind of wondering, how do you do it?
I think it's just keeping busy to avoid the reality of the year that's going on around us. But yeah, no, I like to be busy, and I think we've had to make so many changes because obviously physical events are not happening anymore. So really just, I don't know, keeping busy, trying new projects and learning tons about stuff that we didn't know before. So yeah.
Well, it's been 2 years since the last time you were on the show, and obviously a lot has changed, a lot has evolved for the company, and that's outside of just the topic du jour of COVID. I wonder if you could just give us like a quick timeline of what's transpired since 2018 was the last time we had you on the show.
Right, because that was when we went to the US for the first time for the tour, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was so much fun and so exhausting. So back then was like the first time I was full time on the Barista League. Before that, I was just doing it around the full-time barista job that I had. And so since then, we've become more of like a real company, essentially. So we've gone from 1.5 people to we're 5 now, working on different projects. So a lot more of my time personally is spent like managing the team and coming up with new things. Whereas back then it was very much like, okay, we're going to do a project, let's do that project. So grown a lot, we're doing a lot more, and it's challenging, but super fun. We've got a lot more balls in the air, it seems, definitely now.
Well, you got more hands to help you, and that's really incredible. That for coffee shops, it's like going from 1 store to 3 stores, and that seems like a parallel. And there's so much more management, not just the event itself, but managing a staff of people. And how has that experience been for you, as going from like the single, the head of the company to now having a team that's in the production?
Yeah, on one hand, it's like incredible. Like getting to work with other people is so much more fun. There's more energy, more creativity. You've got someone to cry to and someone to laugh with, and kind of get through everything with. But on the other hand, it's also like as you said, there's so much more time involved in really boring things like paperwork and salaries and just managing people. And because even before the pandemic, we were all completely remote. So as we've gone from 2 people being able to kind of check in regularly, getting into a rhythm between the 2 of us, to 5, it's been really interesting for us to all discover how to best work together and how to best connect in those kind of social ways that you would normally have when you sit in an office and you talk over lunch or you talk when you come in. We obviously don't necessarily have that. So We have one of our team, Carolyn, is in Melbourne. We have one in South Africa. Angela's in Baltimore, and I'm in Sweden, and Hannah's now in the UK. So we're really all over the place, and the time zones are just absolutely insane. It's been fun to try and work out how we can work together productively, but then also be able to hang out and get to know each other so that we're not just in these little isolated bubbles.
What a time to be alive. That I just hearing you describe
Right.
that is so bizarre to me. So obviously, you had a strong vision when you started the Barista League, and as you bring more people on, there's going to be contribution of ideas, and the evolution of what you do at the Barista League is going to take on some of those ideas as well. I mean, has that been a reality as you've been working with a team that they've really helped shape sort of the expression of what the Barista League is?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from everyday stuff around like how we communicate and how we what sort of people we work with, like that's kind of really integrated into everyday. Like I try to have everyone have as much like autonomy over the projects that they're on, so that it's not me just dictating, okay, go and send these emails. It's everyone's really invested in all the decisions that we make. For me, it's really important that everyone can stand behind everything that we do as a company, not like, oh, well, I don't agree with this, but Steven says we have to. I want everyone to feel like they have a say in it. So yeah, I mean, definitely that.
It hasn't been that long since you've had this number of staff before the pandemic started to sort of unroll on the world. And imagine that, having a team of people created a little bit more resiliency for how you pivoted in the midst of it. So I guess the question is, how did you react to and pivot in the midst of this, as on the surface it seems like this is a big threat to what you do, just like it is to like trade shows and the like. So what did the Barista League do in pivoting with COVID?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's actually like, so Zanella, Carolyn, and Hannah all started since the pandemic, since we've kind of done this pivot and transition to new stuff. So when in March, like when the US shut its borders to Europe, we kind of basically that same day realized we weren't going to be able to do physical events. So we, from that day onwards, like just started throwing ideas at the wall and trying to find new ways to kind of create value for barista communities and connect people and keep doing what we're doing. And so between then and maybe the end of July, early August, was just this like incredibly steep learning curve as 3 event people tried to learn how to do like basically a TV show or like a online, video series. And so that was like incredibly difficult. And then since then, so Zanella is one of our newest hires, and she's based in South Africa. She's actually a TV person who used to work on like TV game shows. So we brought in some competencies into the company to be able to do things like make this TV show or make this Barista League online show. So yeah, I think the last few months have just been about like, okay, what are our core values to the barista community and to the partners that we work with, and how can we do them virtually? How can we do them with content? How can we do them with physical events, and kind of maintain that core value that we feel, which is connecting the barista community together.
That's really interesting that you bring up TV, and I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it makes a lot of sense that it's like producing a TV show. And I guess one of the reasons why I might not immediately think of that is because typically events for baristas, and I'm not going to say that this is all events, but we tend to throw them together, and we tend to have, like, if we're all together and we're all having fun, then we're having a successful event. And sometimes if you want to meet online, just classic group calls on Zoom and things like that, it's real hectic. But bringing in that element of, no, this is like a show. It's an event for community, but it's also a show, which it sounds almost like that's opposed to community, but it's not. So I wonder, how did you start to think of that as, no, this is a production like a show, but it's also for connecting people so they can interact?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was something that we realized a little bit too slowly, but you started off by saying that events And I agree with you that events kind of rely on the fact that everyone's in a room together. So even if the competition is like a little bit boring to watch, which I think all coffee competitions suffer from a little bit, you can cover that up with fantastic people in the room, with music, with beers, maybe with tension because you really want to find out who wins. But the actual like watching a coffee competition, regardless of what type it is not like the most exciting thing in the world. Mm-hmm. So as we started doing the first season, we realized like we don't want to just digitize the coffee competition because then we're taking all the bad parts of the coffee competition and none of the good stuff. So instead, we tried to just think like, okay, how can we make this entertaining? Because there are a lot of people who are really into coffee and want to learn more about it. There are people who are really into competitions, and there are already like tons of formats that exist in the world, like Great British Bake Off or Chopped or Masterchef. So there's obviously this template for making like food-centric competitions watchable. So that was like a learning process through the first season. And then this season, we really went into it with how can we make each of these an actual episode with the story arc and a narrative and keep people engaged from like when they first start watching through to the very end.
Oh, that's brilliant. My family is obsessed with MasterChef Junior, watching it with my son every night. And you notice like, even in doing podcast production, you notice what the editors are doing for you in creating story arcs and making that competition watchable. Because if you had to sit through having somebody fry an egg, for the 90 minutes that they give them, you would kill yourself. It would it's terrible. But it somehow is riveting to watch the egg being fried when it's edited well. So bravo for thinking of it that way, and also bringing in the competencies to really dig into that. And it seems like it's been pretty successful this first season.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely trying. I wouldn't say that we're any like. I wouldn't necessarily compare us to MasterChef. Like those guys have these huge budgets, giant teams, and just insane amounts of competency to do these really incredible shows. Yeah, I mean, one thing that we've been struggling with so much is that if you shoot, even like we've been shooting some stuff locally in Gothenburg for some other stuff, and the difference of control you have of when you're in a room and you can give notes and you can reshoot something and you can frame stuff so that you don't have like a dirty sock on the counter that should actually be on the floor. We've lost all of that because we have competitors in the US, we have competitors in Asia, we have like editor in Melbourne, and like we just have to trust that they're gonna shoot the right stuff, and then we get it back and we're like, oh, this is fantastic, but there's like this one thing in frame that we can't have in frame, or they've said it in a slightly wrong way. And so it blows my mind every day that like Zanella and Carolyn are putting this together, despite the fact that we're getting this like disparate footage from different people and still managing to cut it all together.
Excellent. And what's the balance between the production and all the stuff that goes into making it smooth and watchable, and also making sure that you're delivering on the connection part of it, when the community part of it, so it's not just highly edited, but it's also accomplishing the mission for which it was created?
Yeah, so we've kind of tackled the community in like two different ways. So the competitors are pretty connected to each other. We have like a big Slack channel where everyone can chat, and we meet with them. And they also each have a mentor, so they are checking in with their coffee mentor, like as they do the different competitions. So we're kind of creating connections between the people who are involved in the production. And then the second part is once we release the episodes, then the connecting people together is the people watching being connected to those competitors, and then creating spaces on YouTube comments, on Instagram, for people to kind of invest in those baristas who are on the show, and for them to be able to connect with each other. And so more of the communities you see on, say, Reddit or YouTube that are grown around a piece of content than necessarily trying to put people in a room, which I think is really, really difficult virtually. That is a little bit easier to do when you get people at a trade show, and you can kind of grab a bunch of people, put them in a room, throw some beer on, and everyone gets to kind of mingle and hang out.
Interesting. So it's almost like a kind of fandom that you've created.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But I think it's also like the community is like the coffee community is relatively small, so there's enough access for people to all be able to connect with each other like through the kind of nexus of the Barista League online. At least that's the goal there.
That's great. And that's sorely needed, obviously, when baristas are, even if you're working with a team right now in the pandemic, it might not be your original team. And there's a cloud of, we're still in the midst of hard times, and the COVID pandemic is just sort of taken some of the magic out of being behind the bar that we might have all experienced, even though it was hard to work the bar. Still, this year has just been otherworldly, and people are looking for all sorts of ways to connect. This is one of those things that has really worked magic for people. You produced a new book on what you've learned from producing these events, which is obviously a lot. It's called The Barista League's Guide to Planning Better Events, and it is fantastic. I really love this book. At what point in the journey of doing the Barista League did you realize, part of what's going to be helpful is putting this in book form?
Yeah, so I think we came around to it kind of slowly, because as we grew from Scandinavia into Europe and then into the US, we had people approach us every now and again who would say, hey, can you come to, this small town in Austria, or can you come to so-and-so place in Kentucky or whatever? And obviously, like, being one person or two or three, we couldn't do, events in every city all the time. So we started kind of like, just said, no, we can't do that, but give us a call and we'll like help you out in whatever way we can. And we'd have more people ask us like, hey, how do you put on events? How do you get sponsors? How do you do this and that? And so we didn't want to kind of monetize that in the form of like consulting fees for people who are running local community events, because it feels a little bit wrong for people who are like doing these community focused things without any money and then trying to charge them. And we also had put in so much work into creating all these templates and all this expertise that we wanted a way to kind of convey that to people in the right channel. So eventually we came around to the idea of let's write it down, put it all in a book, and then pair that with an online resource kit so that people can read the book, get all the practical information, and then be able to do their own event for themselves. And that way we can get the information out to more people in a way that works for our team, because we were just two people at that time. So that's kind of why we wrote the book, I guess.
That's awesome. So you're kind of Barista League is sort of an archetype that you can be inspired by, and now read the book and do your own events. It's really good. And I love that this came out, even though when you were writing this, you're not thinking, oh, good, pandemic's happening soon, let's put this book out. But I love that it actually came out during this time, because so much of the narrative around this time is about resetting our expectations of what it means to be a coffee shop or a barista professional in coffee. And, it logically follows that we would, think about how we do events and community. And so here's this book, I think at the perfect time. In the first part of the book, it is obviously heavily focused on pre-production. This is something I guess you would spend most of your time doing when you're planning for events, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the core things I try to get across in the book and in general when people ask about events is that you can solve a lot of problems if your concept's correct, or not correct, but your concept's well thought through from the beginning. So instead of kind of deciding, okay, this is going to cost $5,000, then we need to charge $200 per ticket. Oh no, baristas can't afford $200. Now we need sponsorship to pay for the ticket. So you've got this like kind of loop of problems. If you have like a really thought through pre-production phase where you're considering what the concept is, who's going to be attending, how you want to entice them to attend, then you can kind of make your life a lot easier for you if you just put in a little bit more thought into that initial stage.
Yeah, amen to that. I think Seth Godin talks about thrashing as a concept. When people produce software, they get a really cool idea, and then at the launch, like 2 days before the launch, everyone wants to change it. Everyone wants to put their 2 cents in, and how, when you do that as a company, it ruins whatever it is you're trying to create. So you should do that up front. You should do that first, and then things will be better later for everybody.
I love that you brought up Seth Godin, because one thing I've heard him say before is like, you should focus on the hard things and acknowledging what those hard things are, which is in event is how do you get people there and get them to have fun. So if you really focus your energy on that rather than some of like the peripheral stuff that you think is important, then you save a lot of energy and make it more successful.
That's a very good point. Yeah, Seth has a lot of good points. And I think that we do that to make ourselves feel comfortable in the process, because it's uncomfortable to focus on the hard things, right? Even in any time management book, we'll talk about eat that frog, or just doing hard things first, because the temptation is to reorganize your desk instead of actually writing the thing you needed to write. And event planning and production doesn't seem like it's going to break that rule, that we just go to the path of least resistance.
Yeah, exactly.
So in this section, there are almost 20 points that you make here. And there's other authors that have contributed to this. I should mention some really cool people in coffee that you've folded into this content, which is awesome. We don't have time to talk about 20 things, but I would love to hear from you maybe what you think are maybe the hardest, as we've talked about, or / most important things that people need to focus on in this pre-production stage of planning an event.
I mean, I think being really honest about why you want to do the event and who you want to do it for is the biggest and most important thing. So I always use the example of throwdowns, because everyone understands them. You say, I want to do a community event. Okay, let's do a latte art throwdown. But if you have a good understanding of your particular barista community, then you might be able to avoid all of the milk waste, all of the energy of putting together that throwdown, and do something simpler that's more unique and more exciting for the baristas in your community. So I'd say like the two really important things are like, know who you're doing it for and know why you're doing it. And then if you've got that in your mind, like you put it on a poster and put it in front of your computer or behind your computer screen, and just always keep coming back to that. So when you get bogged down in details about delivery times and money and financing and all these types of things, you can come back and say like, okay, why am I doing this and who am I doing this for? And does the small detail that I'm working on enhance their experience or detract from it? So I'd say like if you can nail in on what that concept is, then it'll help guide you through the rest of the process when you have to start making compromises.
Well, that's an excellent point, because we do have a concept in mind when we consider an event, and it tends to be about us in a sense, because we have the creative idea and creative control, and it's just easier to make all the decisions. Practically speaking, I mean, how do you go about zeroing in on the needs of your community? Do you just go out and ask people directly? Is it as simple as that? I mean, what does that look like to be connected to the need so that you can actually fulfill it?
Yeah, I mean, asking is always a great idea. I mean, if you're a barista and you're working with 10 other baristas and you have 50 other barista friends in your city, then I would say you're pretty connected to what people are talking about, what equipment they're using, what problems they have, and that would help. In my opinion, would help you inspire you as to what sort of event they might want or what people are talking about and are interested in. And if you're doing it for a group that is, so if you're a barista and you wanted to run an event for roasters, then I would just go in and talk to them and just start asking them questions about, what information they're missing, what they're excited about, and just try and get to the heart of what gets people excited, and then that could help you kind of latch on to your concept.
What gets them excited? That I want to zero in on that just a little bit, because then they might say some, if your focus is on serving them and doing something for them, then if they say something to you like, we really want to have a panel discussion on equity in coffee, or we really want to make this event about coffee skills and not latte art skills. You might be deflated if you thought this was about you just having them confirm what you wanted to do. But if you're focused on them, then no matter what they say, it's going to be like, okay, cool. You just gave me more ability to, do what I set out to do, which was to serve the community.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you come in with your event concept before your why and your who, then you're exactly right. You'd feel deflated because like, oh, but I've already in my mind planned this cycling event, and now you're saying you want to do an educational seminar. But if as you say, you're coming in with, okay, what do I want to do? I want to get my local community to engage with each other more. And then you will have succeeded whether you bring them into a room. Like you will have succeeded when they're all in a room together, meeting and hanging out, regardless of whether they're on a bicycle, making coffee, listening to a lecture, or just getting drunk. So then your options for what the event actually is, expand exponentially, but you can still achieve your goal of, like, say, getting people in a room together and creating a more connected barista community.
Right. So you get this information, and now you know what the direction of the event is, and you have to produce it now. And that means that you're going to have to focus on, there's a section on production after the planning, or at least part of the planning is production, I guess. But it really focuses on details. And we've mentioned it a couple of times, focusing on details in this conversation, but it's easy for us to overlook details in an event because maybe we feel like we've called, getting it off the ground at all is a victory. And so we can breathe a sigh of relief, and things can tend to get sloppy, I guess. But I wonder if you would elaborate on and talk a little bit about what our focus should be when it comes to details.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think details is kind of like a sound engineer at a concert. Like it's only when it's bad that you realize that they're there. So if you do a good job in production, people won't even think about it. They'll be able to go to the toilet without waiting for half an hour. They'll be able to get water if they want, or not have hot beer. And then how to do it. Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of painstaking work. One thing I think that one tool that we use when we do an event is, after we've kind of, obviously, checklists, just like lots and lots of lists and lots of documents that you can remind yourself about what you've forgotten. But one thing that we do is, about a week or 2 weeks before the event, we'll write briefs for everyone who's involved in the event. So if, Chris, you're coming and you're going to be our MC, we would write a brief for you that explains why we're doing the event, our code of conduct, and then everything that you should expect from when you step your foot in the door to when you leave. And we've found that as we write that, we'll realize all the things that we've forgotten. So we'll be like, okay, Chris, when you arrive, you'll be met by one of our team and they'll talk you through the event. And then you'll be like, wait, who is going to do that? Do we have time? Is this on the schedule? And then so every brief that you write will ask a million questions that you then have to answer and make sure you can check them off. And just like the more things that you can address in production or pre-production, the less stressed you're going to be when those things pop up on the night.
It sounds like assumption is the enemy here.
Yes. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
And you've probably learned that from a few mistakes along the way, I bet.
Yeah, I think it's in the book, but one anecdote I always come back to is like this reminding people thing. So I think in normal life, it's a little bit impolite to, call your friends 25 times if you're just going to go have dinner or have a drink. Like, it's a little bit overzealous. But if anything in your event is contingent on someone doing something, then there's no maximum amount of times that you can check with them that is too many. So if someone's bringing something that's really important, you should be checking a week before, a day before, 2 hours before, and just make sure that they're extremely aware that, yes, they need to be here at this particular time. And it can be a little bit overzealous, but that one time when they don't show up, and then now your event's totally like in the lurch, it's just an amount of stress that is not worth that, extra embarrassment of calling someone and be like, oh, I know I called you yesterday, but are you definitely coming? So, yeah.
So it's the balance or trade-off between slightly annoying somebody and total failure.
Yeah, exactly. And so we are sometimes a little bit annoying, but try not to have the total failure.
That's a good trade-off, I think. And we actually do that in coffee bars where, somebody might assume that, well, they're adults, they understand how to do X, Y, and Z, and they can figure it out because they're smart. But the communication obviously is a huge sore point for many a barista, because it doesn't happen as much as it probably should. And some of that is because of the pressure that you're under. You're not using as much of your frontal lobe as you think you are when you're in a rush. And so that annoying reminder about standard operating procedures, or in this case, to the MC in your example, who the audience is and codes of conduct, they might just get into this monologue and almost say something, but then realize, oh, one of those 25 messages I got from Steven said, don't do that. And so it seems like it really come in clutch.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's not 25 messages that we're sending to people. Yeah, no, but I mean, obviously, like, it's kind of, as you said with the coffee bar, like, you can make shorthand. So if you have a customer that comes in every day, you probably don't need to do the full explanation that you give to someone that you've never seen before. And that's similar with people, suppliers you work with or partners you work with. You start to get to know, like, okay, am I going to have to chase down this person consistently, or am I going to be able to trust that they're just going to show up? And it's something that you learn with relationships with people, I think.
Yeah. So when you're talking about details and planning, and there's a lot of like answering questions that you think people might have ahead of time, so you're being preemptive with a lot of this stuff. And then in terms of execution of the event, you mentioned staffing in production, and when I've been to some throwdowns where nobody knows what job they're supposed to be doing. I've been to throwdowns where people actually have very specific jobs, and it goes so much better. But I mean, what keeps us from thinking of staffing when it comes to an event, and how should we approach that when we're trying to pull something off successfully?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit different between big and small events. So, like, with big events, I think one of the most common problems is that volunteers get a little bit forgotten about. They just get assumed and left by themselves. And I think a volunteer is like, they're the person who's invested the most in your event. They've come to work for you for a certain amount of hours for free, for nothing else than the experience or their engagement with your brand or event. So I think with big events, I would make a point to say that, like, people should always pay everyone they possibly can. And then if you do have volunteers or helpers, just make sure that you're, like, giving as much as possible to them, whether that's food, thank you and gratitudes, and just looking after them so they have a fantastic time. And then with smaller events, I think maybe a lot of it is to do with not wanting to impose on people. So I'm going to throw an event for my local community, and I feel like if I ask anyone to help out, I'm just imposing on their time, or I'm asking too much. But my experience is that people more than often are really keen to help out and want to be involved. And even more than that, we've spoken with a bunch of people who say that they volunteer and they help out events as a way to kind of combat that they're introverted or their social anxiety. You have, like, a job, you're the dishwasher, or you're there to kind of take time, and it's a way for you to engage with people at the event without having to stand awkwardly and take as much social anxiety as you're doing it. So I think, like, just asking people is really important. Just what's the worst that can happen if you ask someone, and trying to put as many people in all the important jobs as possible.
That's a great point, that people are looking for ways to contribute, and coffee is a great community, and that people are more than willing 99.9% of the time to do that type of thing. And not taking them for granted is so key. I wonder how you go about, or would recommend going about, deciding how many people you need for an event in terms of staff and volunteers and things like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard, but you can't have too many is a pretty good general rule. One, you asked before about, like, my one piece of pre-production advice. Well, my one piece of, like, production advice is that you, the organizer, should not have a single job once the event starts. So you've put on all this time and energy into organizing it, and when you're doing that, you're thinking, oh yeah, and then I can just run in the back and prep some snacks, and then I can run over here and do this, because each of those tasks sound like they're, like, minor things that only take a few minutes. But every second that you step away to do something is a second that there's no one at the helm kind of steering the ship of the event. So in terms of like, how do you staff an event, make sure that you don't have any actual jobs at the event, and then that's enough.
How do you not feel lazy? How do you not feel like you're not contributing? Like, I get why people do those little things, because they physically feel like they need to be doing something. That's a mental hurdle. I mean, how do you get over that?
Well, I'd say it's not that you're not going to do anything. It's that you don't have any what's called like any jobs planned. So obviously stuff's going to go wrong. Things are going to need to be addressed. People are going to need to talk to you. So you're not going to be sitting still for a second.
Mm-hmm.
But you shouldn't plan in like, oh, well, I can also run the slideshow, or I can also take time for the competition, because then you're stuck in that job. Whereas if you're organizing it, you need to be able to step away from any job at any time when the stove catches on fire, or when the espresso machine breaks, or when the microphone stops working. And so if you're locked into a particular job that requires like attention, then you can't solve anything else that happens during the event.
Right. Excellent point. Yeah. Now, let's say that we, pull off a very successful event. And I want to, and before we get into this, because we're nearing wrapping up with our conversation here, but there is so much in this book I want to reiterate to people that we're not covering in this conversation. So you should definitely be looking to get this book. After the event is over, and we usually are just like, man, I'm going to either nurse my wounds or I'm going to celebrate. But we don't really think about after the event as much as we do about before the event. What do you think is critical that we do after the event is over?
Yeah, I agree. It's so often overlooked. You just kind of finish it, clap your hands, and then nurse the hangover. But doing a debrief with your volunteers, staff, competitors, attendees, sponsors, like those conversations, whether it's informal at the convention the next day or at a bar, or whether it's like a formal survey, you're going to learn so much about the things you did right and the things you did wrong. And if your goal is to do more events, then it's kind of irresponsible, in my opinion, not to do some type of debrief and post reporting with your team, at least, just to say like, okay, what could have we done better, and how can we implement that for next time? Otherwise, you're just kind of going to repeat the same mistakes.
So taking all of this for what it's worth in events, and then applying it to online events, and let's say our local barista community in a city that's a little bit more shut down because of COVID, and they don't want to get people together. How do you go about, or I guess a good question would be, what would you say is key for somebody wanting to apply these principles to a remote event for their community?
Yeah, I'd come back to that initial thing around like, who are you doing this for and why? Because while in normal times we might have thrown a latte out throw down where everyone can come and gather, the benefit of doing that in real life, of getting people together, is not met by the latte out part of a digital competition. So if you really know what you want to do for the people that and who you want to do that for, maybe it's easier for you to find how you would do that digitally. It might be like the kind of coffee breaks people are doing, where they meet up once a day and have coffee with each other. It might be creating content online. It might be a chat group on Discord or a Reddit subreddit or something. But I'd say like the digital platforms and channels are so different to physical that you should lean into how they work already. Like there are already online communities and platforms that you can kind of look to and be inspired by, and then just finding out what your needs of the community are and how they can be matched to those different channels. That's kind of how I feel about it, at least.
Yeah, you all have been on a big learning curve in terms of figuring out the tools that go on behind the scenes in order to facilitate these online events. But it's in terms of learning, it really there's so many helpful websites and tutorials on how to use pretty much anything out there when it comes to digital production, and so it seems like, and maybe you agree here, that it's not as intimidating as you might think.
No, and I mean, what you can only try. Like you should just go for it and learn as you go, because if you do have the connection to your community and you can get people engaged, then they're going to forgive like those small mistakes, whether it's at an event and you've forgotten something, or whether it's like not the best video quality the first time you do like a Zoom stream or something like that. But if you are connecting with people and you're meeting, getting them excited about what you're doing, then like you're doing a fantastic job.
So we've talked about a lot of helpful things here, and I wanted to kind of figure out what is next for you. What's on the horizon for the Barista League, and how can we stay in touch with what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, first just follow us on Instagram at the Barista League, and we have a bunch of stuff coming out next year. So we will hopefully in the future be doing some physical events again, but in the meantime, we have this really exciting kind of conference-y educational thing coming up in March next year that we're really excited about, called High Density, that we'll announce sometime in the new year. And we have the Barista League Online, obviously, starting on the 25th of November. The first episode comes out, and those episodes come out weekly on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. But yeah, just follow along on Instagram and you'll catch everything that we do on there.
Excellent. Stephen, a pleasure to talk to you again. I'm so excited for the growth of the Barista League and what's next for you all. Thank you for joining us on Keys to the Shop.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, well, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation, and I definitely recommend that you go to thebaristaleague.com to learn more about upcoming events and also to order this book, because as I said in this conversation, there's so much more in the book that we didn't discuss. You can get that at the website, again, thebaristaleague.com. Ebooks are available as well, and they also have an online resource kit available to go with it. So big thank you to Stephen for joining us on the show again, and we really appreciate the work that you and your team do for the barista community and are super excited for the projects coming up on the horizon. So again, for more information, you can go visit them over at thebaristaleague.com and also follow them on Instagram at the Barista League. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about this episode or any other episode on the show, then feel free to email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. That's how you can get in touch with me. That's also the email you can use to inquire about Keys to the Shop consulting. Again, that is chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that is the end of our episode today. I really appreciate you all tuning in to Keys to the Shop. Thank you so much for sharing these episodes, rating and reviewing the show, and being a part of the Keys to the Shop community. It's such an honor to be able to produce these shows and offer this content to you. I hope you have an amazing day. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.